Good morning, everyone. This is Nikki Conti from the Health Connector. I'm going to give Paul a moment to breathe. You'll notice that our next segment, eligibility and enrollment, is scheduled for about an hour and 15 minutes. We all can appreciate this is quite a bit of information. So what Paul and I are intending to do is step through the highlights for about 1 hour and then try to leave about 15 minutes for questions. So we really appreciate your attention to all the details in this presentation. So I'm going to start right on slide 3 of this presentation. So there are some major concepts that are going to be covered and we want you to feel comfortable with. So we want you to feel comfortable with understanding how eligibility is determined. We want you to feel comfortable with describing the criteria used to determine individual and family eligibility. We're going to review key dates for enrollment. We're also going to step through the enrollment processes for individuals and families for non-group products and describe the processes for billing and payment in non-group products. Okay. So moving to slide 5, I think one of the callers before I'd ask this question, what is non-group coverage? I think for folks who are familiar with working with Mass Health members as well as Commonwealth Care members, we're not used to that term non-group. But I think, it's important to just note that, the world's shifting, things are changing. At the Health Connector, you know that we're going to be selling, we're offering qualified health plans. So in the past, we had offered Commonwealth Care plans and Commonwealth Choice plans. But now, we're kind of thinking about our world in a non-group and small group, kind of non-group and small group buckets. So we'll try to keep the lingo to a minimum. We're just talking about individuals and families. So on slide 7, I think folks are pretty familiar with this process, but I think there are going to be a couple of important things here to note. Basically, what this chart is showing you is, each of the steps that a consumer is going to need to take before they can become enrolled in a health insurance plan. So first and foremost, we need to establish eligibility, and then consumers need to shop and compare plans. They need to submit some enrollment information, submit terms and conditions, and then submit payment. For our Health Connector members, this submitting payment piece is incredibly important, so I just want to put that in the back of your mind. During this presentation, we're going to go through each of these segments in much greater detail, but as you're training your staff, I think this might be a good visual that you might want to print out, have them pin up at their desk, because it really gives them a nice little, a nice reference. If you go on to slide 8, this is labeled enrollment for transitioning members. So I think you've heard us say over and over again that we have several individuals in Massachusetts who are transitioning. Specifically here at the Connector, we're transitioning our Commonwealth Care members as well as our Commonwealth Choice members. And individuals and families who are in subsidized insurance coverage, as you know, are going to require transition into a Health Connector QHP, and there are some very key dates here or else they're going to risk losing their coverage. December 23rd, I know you've heard us say this before, but I just want to kind of put that date in the back of everyone's mind. That December 23rd date is the date in which individuals and families who are trying to enroll in the January coverage should have applied, enrolled, and actually made their payment by that date. There are other consumers at the Health Connector, such as individuals, families, and employees in our commercial coverage, our Commonwealth Choice, our Business Express, or our Young Adult plans, who also must transition. There are all sorts of things that these folks need to do. The paths that these folks need to take are very similar, and the date for a number of them are the same. So again, some key things to keep in mind. Commonwealth Care is ending on December 31st. Our Young Adult program is ending on December 31st. Our Commonwealth Choice program, I'm going to say this again later, but you're just going to hear me like repeating things over and over again. Commonwealth Choice will be ending by March 31st. They're for our individuals and families. other Business Express programs are going to run throughout the 2014 calendar year. So you'll see that in other slides, but just want you to hear it again. Let's move on to slide 10. So I think some of you are familiar with this information, but it's always, I think this is laid out a little bit differently and will be helpful for you as you explain it to other folks within your organization. So what is non-group eligibility? So for those who are seeking health insurance through mahealthconnector.org, whether they're seeking non-subsidized or subsidized, there are a couple of key pieces of information that we need to verify. This is the same for Health Connectors, this is the same for Mass Health. First, we need to confirm that the individual is a U.S. citizen, national, or non-citizen lawfully present in the U.S. We need to know that the person is a resident of the Commonwealth of Mass. He or she intends to reside in Massachusetts. And we also need to confirm that the person is not incarcerated. Now, there's an important note here about Indian status. So, verified Indian status is not an eligibility requirement, but it does entitle individuals to additional cost-sharing reductions in special enrollment periods. In a few slides, we're going to dedicate some time just looking at American Indians, but I think it's important to note up front when someone is shopping that if they are in fact, do in fact have Indian status, they may be eligible for additional cost-sharing reductions and are not subject to the limited enrollment period. Now, if somebody is seeking subsidized coverage, there are some other eligibility criteria. They need to have a household income of less than or equal to 400% of the federal poverty level, and they may be eligible for subsidized health insurance if the applicant meets income requirements and is not eligible for certain minimum essential coverage. And we are going to get into that in greater detail. If you look at the chart on slide 11, I think this chart does a really good job of showing you some of the information that we've been presenting over time. Now, what we're looking at here, from the Health Connector perspective only, really, is we're looking at the income levels from 0 to 400% of FPL. So again, individuals who are within that income bracket could come in and be eligible for a QHP. However, individuals with incomes from 0 to 133, the only folks who are eligible within that income bracket are lawfully present immigrants, okay, for Health Connector QHPs. Above that income bracket, individuals may be eligible for federal cost-sharing reductions, as well as state premium and cost-sharing subsidies up to 300% of the federal poverty level. These are going to be rolled into our Connector Care plans. Again, individuals up to 300% of the FPL, Connector Care. Then there's the bracket between 3 to 400%. These are folks who in the past, those folks really in that income level weren't necessarily known to us. So there is an opportunity here to get additional folks enrolled with some subsidies that hadn't had subsidies before. So I'm going to move along to slide 12. And I think slide 12 more or less says everything I just said, but we'll look at that again and just make sure we don't have anything missing here. When you are teaching this back to your folks, I think what is important to note on slide 12 is that the Connector Care plans, and actually this is a really important point to make, and again we'll probably be repeating it a few times today. Connector Care plans are going to be funded by premium tax credits and cost-sharing reductions, as well as additional state subsidies. So similar to Commonwealth Care, there are 3 types of Connector Care plans. Plan type 1, 2, and 3, and you can see the income thresholds associated with each type. These plans are also detailed in the appendix, and we can take a look at that. But it's important to know that if somebody wants to receive federal cost-sharing subsidies and state subsidies within that income level, they need to enroll in a Connector Care plan. For individuals, eligible individual Mass residents may qualify for a premium tax credit, which is first applied to qualified health plans, and then any remaining amount of the pediatric portion of the qualified dental plan. And we'll talk a little bit more about dental plans as well. So I'd like to move your attention to slide 13. I think someone had asked the question, if not today, in another presentation, how are connector care plans put together? How are these subsidies calculated? So I think a really easy way to think about this is that there are really three parts to the connector care plans. There are the federal subsidies, there are the state subsidies, and then there's the member contribution, the amount that the member is going to need to pay towards their premium. So the method in which the premium tax credit is determined is explained here, as well as state subsidy. And we're going to go through this on other slides, but I really want a couple of things on this. One is, we will go through the examples, but I don't want to cause any panic for people. I want you to remember that the system is going to be calculating this. They're not going to be required to sit with members and do the math calculation. But I think it's important for you to know that this connector care premium or this connector care plan is made up of these different pieces. And when an individual is going through the experience and they see the rates returned for the connector care plan, those rates are based on the individual selecting the maximum premium tax credit that's available to them. So we're going to stress that. I'm going to stress that. Paul's going to stress that, and then our other colleagues will be talking about that this afternoon when they talk more about our connector care plans. But I just want you to make note of that. Also down the bottom, income eligibility is determined by the applicant's MAGI. And we have staff here who are going to talk to you and answer some questions about modified adjusted gross income. So we have them here as well. So let's move on to slide 14. I wanted to take a look at this chart with you just so you can get a sense of the premium targets, the subsidized coverage. So you have, similar to how Commonwealth Care is broken out today, this chart explains connector care in a similar way, but also explains the tax credits as well as the premium that the member would be responsible for. So in the middle row, you're seeing the maximum tax credit that the person within the income level would be eligible for. And then in the last row, you're seeing the connector care plans, the lowest cost plans available within that bracket. Something to note here is that the connector care member contribution does not vary by age within a region of Massachusetts. Okay. So each region will have its own member premium payment schedule. Plan availability will also vary at the zip code level, and this will affect the member's contribution schedule. So similar, but slightly different than today. All right. So I know Paul and I said we weren't going to go through examples just because we do have a lot of things to cover, but I want to bring your attention, if you could, in your books, check off example 15, 16, 15, 16, and 17. This is going to be really helpful when you are talking to staff in your organization. We took a fairly simple example. We took John, who is single, 24, with an income of $22,980, and his FPL is 200%. So what we did is we break down how, what his premium tax credit is, what his connector care plan might cost. If John went a different route, what would that look like for him? And this is something that folks had asked just so you could spend a little bit more time kind of figuring out how this could work in real life. On slide 18, the premium tax credit, let's look at the column on the left for a moment. I think it's really important that you feel comfortable with this. So premium tax credit, again, who is eligible? So eligible Mass residents earning equal to or less than 400% of FPL may qualify for federal premium tax credit. Enrollees must elect a qualified health plan through the Health Connector and not be eligible or enrolled in other qualifying minimum essential coverage, and we'll cover this. And then there are some notes here that are important to note. Native Americans, Alaskan Indians with incomes greater than 300 do not pay any point of service cost sharing for services received at Indian Health Services Center. And then all premium tax credits provided to all individuals and families are first applied to the qualified health plan, and then the remaining portion is applied to the pediatric portion of the qualified dental plan. That is a mouthful. Just know, up to 400% of FPL, folks could be eligible for tax credit. Our connector care folks, that is up to 300 of FPL. In order for them to be able to take advantage of that lowest cost, they need to take their maximum premium tax credit. I think that's more for you to, that's important for you to know. If the rest of this is really for your reference on 18. On slide 19, this slide talks about the health safety net. So HSN, and folks know this also is free care. It is not going away. It's going to be administered by Mass Health, and it's going to cover certain qualified health plans, qualified QHP eligible individuals and families who meet income and eligibility rules and who are pending enrollment in a Health Connector plan. So I want to leave mark that slide off as well. You want to take a look at that slide. And apologies for going so quickly, but there is quite a lot of detail here. We want to take your questions. On slide 20, I mentioned that I would spend more time on American Indians and Alaskan Natives.
It's so many of them.
So let's look at this, and I'm going to read this back to you. So what's the eligibility and, special enrollment? So there are some special provisions for eligibility, enrollment, and cost sharing. So an Indian is defined as a person who has either been verified as having Indian status or is attested to being an Indian and is awaiting verification of Indian status. Determination for special treatment for American Indians, Alaska Natives, regarding enrollment and cost sharing must be made regardless of whether the applicant requests such a determination. An American Indian, Alaska Native must meet all other eligibility criteria and must also meet enrollment criteria. And an American Indian, Alaska Native may enroll in a QHP or change from one QHP to another one time per month. This is different than other folks, so you may want to mark that off. For Indians who are enrolled in any non-group product through the Health Connector at any metallic tier and have a household income of less than or equal to 300%, all members' cost sharing is eliminated. And this elimination of cost sharing also applies to services, items, or referrals by the Indian Health Services for Indians who have household magi of any amount. And we have an appendix in the back of this module that talks about where all the Indian Health Service centers are in Massachusetts. So on slide 21,
Who holds
just curious. I don't really need an answer, but...
They do have an ID card. I've seen an ID card.
Okay, so there's...
There is an Indian ID card.
Hello?
Hi, folks. I think we can hear you.
Yes.
And I'm glad that there's a lot of conversation about the American Indian ID cards. Would you mind putting the phone on mute for the others? Thank you. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about the catastrophic plan and eligibility. So this is something new, something a little bit different for folks. On slide 21, if an individual is eligible for enrollment in a catastrophic plan, if he or she either has not attained age 30 before the beginning of the year or is 30 years old or older when the plan year begins and has a certificate of exemption based on financial hardship or a lack of affordable coverage, meets the criteria for eligibility to purchase individual non-group plans, and is at any income level. Special to note here, if enrolling in an individual plan during a closed enrollment period, an individual must meet the special conditions to enroll outside of the annual open enrollment period. And I just want to note that we have an appendix at the back here that talks about special conditions and more specifically the triggering events. And there are a few other points here about individuals enrolled in a catastrophic plan who turn 30, as well as when someone can purchase. So I think this is another one to come back to read through. But catastrophic plans are something new for the Health Connector. And the very last point is important for you to have in the back of your mind. Individuals purchasing catastrophic coverage are not eligible for premium tax credits, federal cost sharing, or state subsidies. So these catastrophic plans typically are of lower cost. So we just want you to be aware of these. They are available, but they do not, will not be, you cannot apply tax credits and federal cost sharing to these. On slide 22, these are all of the eligibility verification criteria for non-group. Again, whether someone is seeking coverage through the Health Connector or Mass Health, as well as I want to have you look at slide 23. Okay, so I think folks are fairly comfortable with the information, or have seen the information that's on slide 22, but I want to bring your attention to slide 23. This may be something that we haven't spent a lot of time on in the past. So what is minimum essential coverage? So minimum essential coverage is the minimum standard of coverage to comply with the ACA's and the individual mandate. To be eligible for a non-group subsidized coverage, enrollees must not have access to minimum essential coverage. Access to MEC will prevent an applicant from receiving federal and state assistance, and access to MEC can be defined in two ways. One, for certain types of coverage, just being eligible can block an applicant from receiving a subsidy, and two, for other types of coverage, enrollment is required to block an applicant from receiving a subsidy. So for example, if you look to the left, eligibility for these types of MEC can block an applicant. So Medicaid coverage, Medicare coverage, including Medicare Advantage. And then to the right, enrollment in these types of MEC can block an applicant from receiving a subsidy. So certain types of veterans health coverage, and then coverage purchased in the individual market. Another piece that you might want to have your staff photocopy and hang up. All right, so on slide 24, when someone is submitting their eligibility, well, someone may need to submit eligibility verification documentation. So if someone applies and then the system indicates that an individual or family is not eligible for state or federal support, the person or the individual or family is provisionally eligible if he or she attests to meeting the eligibility criteria. So this is really important. This is something very new. So the individual or family will receive a letter that requests information needed to verify that they are eligible for state or federal support, and there's also a deadline to submit these documents. So they have 90 days to provide documentation, during which time they're going to be eligible based on the attestation. So there is required verifications for both non-subsidized and subsidized coverage, and they're all going to be sent to one location. So that address is here. And then if after the 90 days, if we're unable to verify the attestation, the individual or family's eligibility, if after the 90 days we're unable to verify the attestation, that person or that group's eligibility is going to be determined based on the information we have. Okay. Yeah. I was pausing for reaction in the room. Okay. So on slide 25, just this is a term, you won't be quizzed, but we just want you to feel comfortable with these phrases, concepts. So rating factors. Rating factors are qualities associated with an individual, family, or an employer group, such as age and zip code. These are used to determine the premium cost of a specific health insurance plan. So just something for you to know, non-group or plans for individuals and families, those rates are calculated on a per member basis, and the non-group per member rating factors are geographic area and age. So I am going to skip over the assessment questions and hand this over to my colleague, Paul Anderson.
Hi, everybody. We're going to actually move on to slide 34. So yes, there's quite a number of assessment questions that you'll be able to work with your trainers and trainees back at your respective organizations. But I'd like to move on to the next section that we'd like to cover is open enrollment or special enrollment periods. And moving on to slide 35, what is open enrollment? Again, this is something you are probably already aware of, but I think we need to remember that the federal open enrollment period begins October 1st of this year and runs for 6 months until March 31st of 2014. Note that, again, on slide 35 there, that note that after the 2013 to 2014 enrollment period, the state and federal open enrollment periods will be aligned and will run from October 15th to December 7th, starting in 2014, for an effective date of coverage beginning on January 1st of the following year. So basically, if you've been to the MTFs over the past few months, we've talked about the different enrollment periods going on, and this is basically the last, well, not the last one, but we have this one extended one now for the 6-month period, and then we will be then in line with going forward in 2014, October 15th to December 7th for the following year. So you're probably already familiar with this, you've probably heard about it, you're probably already working with it. Just note that, as Nikki mentioned, there are exceptions known as triggering events, which allow individuals or families to shop outside of the open enrollment period. And there is information in the very extensive appendix in the back of your packet here. For small group, employers can shop year-round. And basically, that's what you need to know. There's a couple points there, but just know that they're a little bit different. And then I'd like to go to looking at on the next slide, which is 36. Sorry. Right, just to look at the key dates, as we mentioned in 2013, looking at the chart, the open enrollment period for the QHPs or the qualified health plans will be October 1st to December 31st. For the effective date of coverage is January 1st, 2014. In the year 2014, from January 1st to March 31st, the effective dates will be in accordance with their coverage effective dates policy. But again, remember, as Nikki mentioned earlier, at least 5 business days before the first of the month when the coverage would begin. And we've mentioned that. It's been in some of the other slides we've talked about, and you'll probably hear it again. It's 5 business days before the first of the month for the QHP coverage. As I just mentioned also, in 2014, the open enrollment period from October 15th to December 7th for coverage that would begin January 1st of 2015, and looking even more forward for 2015 and beyond, from October 15th to December 7th will be the open enrollments for the effective date of coverage beginning January 1st, 2016 and beyond. Note that in that box there on slide 36 that individuals and families who do not enroll in a QHP by April 1st of 2013, which is the day after open enrollment, they risk losing coverage and would then need to wait until the next open enrollment period, which would be October 15th through December 7th of 2014, for an effective date of coverage on January 1st of 2015. Yes. So what are the triggering events on slide 37? As I said, we do have information on this at the back, but this is very important. I think you might be familiar with some of these already, but Again, this is the new naming conventions that are being used at the national level as well. For the non-group or the individual or family product, a triggering event is if they gain a dependent or become a dependent, such as marriage, birth, adoption, placement for foster care, or court-ordered care of child. If someone loses minimum essential coverage, which Nikki had just talked about. If someone becomes eligible for a new qualified dental plan or a qualified health plan due to a permanent move. If someone identifies as an American Indian or Alaskan Native. If someone was erroneously enrolled or not enrolled in a QDP or QHP due to an HHS or Health Connector error. If someone's enrolled in a QDP or QHP that violated a material provision of its contract. If someone becomes eligible or ineligible for premium tax credit or has a change in cost-sharing reductions, this applies to enrollees and their dependents only. If someone is enrolled in unaffordable employer-sponsored insurance or that employer-sponsored insurance does not meet minimum value, if someone meets other exceptional circumstances, or someone becomes a lawfully present individual or citizen. So when must triggering events be reported? This is very important. They must be reported within 60 days of the event to the Health Connector. Changes to plan enrollment are effective in accordance with the enrollment in the individual or family plan, which is a non-group plan policy. For birth, adoption, or placement for adoption or foster care, coverage is the effective date of the event. And premium tax credits or the cost-sharing reductions take effect on the first day of the full month during which the individual or family is enrolled in a qualified health plan or the qualified dental plan. Again, this is important policy information for these triggering events that would be relevant for you and your colleagues to have taped on your walls of your offices or your cubes. Now, submitting enrollment information. Basically, what are the QHP and QDP enrollment methods? And again, sorry for using the acronyms, but it's a lot easier and faster, and you'll be using them before you know it too. For the QHP and QDP enrollment methods, you can, again, online for the qualified health plans only. You can also enroll by paper. You can mail them in person or fax, as we've mentioned earlier, as well as by phone. Again, detailed contact information, including phone numbers, hours, and addresses, are located in the appendix, as we've also already mentioned. Moving on to slide 41. When consumers are eligible to enroll in a plan, what information must they provide? Again, this is just as a reminder that this is the kind of information that they'll need to provide. For the non-group, they'll need to supply or provide eligible individuals or families, select plan name and carrier, the names of all prospective enrollees, including the dependents, the effective date, the selected PCP. Again, this would be for the qualified health plans only. And for dependents that are over 26 years old, disabled status. Again, this is for QHPs only. Now, accepting terms and conditions is moving on. Accepting terms and conditions of the application and enrollment on slide 43. You'll notice that there are three methods here. We have electronic or online submissions, paper submissions, phone submissions. Probably, if you don't already know, the preferred method will be online. The applicant would electronically sign the enrollment forms and the terms and conditions by clicking agree on a confirmation such as I agree. Again, for the qualified health plan and also for the qualified dental plan, but note that online enrollment will not be available for the qualified dental plans on October 1st, but will be available in the coming months. Again, just as you know, there's so much going into the system to build it to be ready for October 1st, but that functionality will be coming in at a later point. But not to worry, we will be making everyone, like the navigators, the certified application counselors, all consumer support organizations will be made available of when functionality is up and running. If any of you are familiar with when MMIS went live and all the information and the communications that went out, it will be similar, if not, it's not more vibrant, more robust. Paper submissions, similar to today, the applicant will physically sign the enrollment form and the terms of conditions, and once signed, both forms are sent to the Health Connector. They can be faxed, they can be mailed, or they can be brought in person for both the qualified health plan and the qualified dental plan. Phone submissions, again, if someone's on the phone with the customer service rep or a navigator, the applicant will attest to agreement by voice, in which case the customer service rep or the navigator can complete the submission electronically, including the signatures of the enrollee and the customer service rep and or navigator. The applicant will sign and mail in a printed completed application that's generated by the customer service rep or the navigator, again, for both the qualified health and or dental plans. To submit payment, again, when and how, again, slide 45, when and how to pay their premium payments. Again, for the QHPs, the qualified health plans, enrollees send their premium payments to the Health Connector. Remember the magic 3 words, 5 business days before. And that's actually in the second bullet. The Health Connector Customer Service Center processes the premium billing and payments. We must receive at least 5 business days before the end of the month for coverage the following month. The Health Connector generates the initial bill and sends to the enrollees. Again, note the 4th bullet, the enrollee can pay by check, by money order, e-pay, in person, or by mail or electronic transfer from a financial institution. The connector processes the enrollment and transmits monthly enrollment confirmation to the issuer, the insurer, and so that means the enrollee does not send the money to the insurer, you send the money to the connector. And the issuer, the insurer, the carrier, will effectuate the enrollment. They produce the member ID numbers and they generate the member packets to the enrollees. All right. So on slide 46, in terms of submitting payment, this is a reference for in case of situations where there's delinquency, termination, and reinstatement for subsidized individuals or families. What happens when a payment is submitted late and or not in full or a plan is terminated? Again, this is really for reference. If there's voluntary terminations, if there's delinquencies, in a case where there's termination for non-payment or reinstatement. I think there's just a couple of things I would like to point out, that in terms of voluntary termination, this occurs when a non-group member voluntarily terminates his or her coverage, which may occur at any time, and this termination will take place prospectively because, as you know, the member would have paid the month in advance because they would have paid at least 5 days before the end of the month. And in terms of reinstatement, again, these are for subsidized individuals and families. Again, subsidized for reinstatement, consumers must reinstate within 30 days of their termination. They can be reinstated an unlimited amount of time. That's key here. And there is no reinstatement fee for enrollees that are receiving federal or state assistance. Just a couple of highlights there, because what I want to do next on slide 47, which looks very similar but is different, because slide 47 actually covers delinquency, termination, and reinstatement for non-subsidized individuals and families. What happens when a payment is submitted? Again, the same scenario. Whether in terms of voluntary termination, delinquency, termination from non-payment, or reinstatement, note that in reinstatement, the differences are for non-subsidized enrollees. I'm at the bottom row there. Non-subsidized, the third bullet, non-subsidized enrollees can only be reinstated once a year, and there's a $50 reinstatement fee for non-subsidized individuals or families and small groups. So I've just pointed out the major differences between delinquency, termination, and reinstatement for subsidized and non-subsidized individuals and families. The other information is also very important, but those are the major differences, which you might end up having calls or questions about. And I believe that brings us to the end